Okay. So this is Our Struggle, an article written by Martin Luther King Jr. Regarding the threats and attacks against the boycott. This report on the Montgomery movement, drafted initially by Bayard Rustin, was the featured article in the second issue of Liberation, which was devoted to the boycott. A new journal edited by Rustin and other radical pacifists, Liberation, included several related articles, including Rustin's Montgomery diary. King, according to this report, sees a new black person emerging in the South. I am always making those corrections because Twitch. The extreme tension in race relations in the South today is explained in part by the revolutionary change in the black evaluation of himself and of his destiny, and by his determination to struggle for justice. The movement finds its strength, King argues, in the black community's economic power, the church's militant leadership, and a new and powerful weapon, nonviolent resistance. So, segregation, with its inevitable discrimination, has thrived on elements of inferiority present in the masses of both white and black people. Through forced separation from our African culture, through slavery, poverty, and deprivation, many black men have lost self-respect. In their relations with black people, white people discovered that they had rejected the very center of their own ethical professions. They could not face the triumph of their lesser instincts and simultaneously have peace within. And so to gain it, they rationalized, insisting that the unfortunate black, being less than human, deserved and even enjoyed second-class status. Ooh. I'm already seeing parallels in some argumentation from conservatives today, honestly. They argued that his inferior social, economic, and political position was good for him. He was incapable of advancing beyond a fixed position and would therefore be happier, encouraged not to attempt the impossible. He is subjugated by a superior people with an advanced way of life. The master race will be able to civilize him to a limited degree, if only he will be true to his inferior nature and stay in his place. Yeah, that is very much the Candace Owens argument. That's... And you see that in the people who push the 1350 line of thinking and everything like that. Or even more grotesquely, the people who still to this day argue that, well, it's good actually that they were forcibly dragged from their homes in Africa because it's better living here now than it is over there, ignoring how conditions there are perpetuated by continued exploitation. And that having their population ravaged set the continent back for centuries. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And also, like, this really wasn't that long ago. And there are many people who are alive today who either grew up with these sentiments or had parents who taught these sentiments. So anyone who says, racism is over, like, this is very blunt language, and this wasn't pulled out of thin air. This is just conveying the typical byline at the time of white people. Let's see. White men soon came to forget that the Southern social culture and all its institutions had been organized to perpetuate this rationalization. They observed a caste system and quickly were conditioned to believe that its social results, which they had created, actually reflected the Negro, Jesus Christ, innate and true nature. I'm reading quotes. It's hard to make corrections on the fly when reading quotes. Sorry. In time, many black people lost faith in them. Thank you, Bank Princess. I just, God damn it. Lost faith in themselves and came to believe that perhaps they really were what they had been told they were, something less than men. So long as they were prepared to accept this role, racial peace could be maintained. It was an uneasy peace in which the black person was forced to accept patiently injustice, insult, injury, and exploitation. Another word for this is negative peace, and this is a concept that I've been trying to... I could do a whole segment, and at some point I will do a whole segment on... Hey, Swiggers. Of negative and positive peace. So basically the idea is fundamentally in conflict resolution. You have a negative peace if the sides in tension, if the dominant side effectively coerces the subjugated side into passivity. You have a ceasefire, you have peace, but it is a peace that comes at the cost of justice. And that doesn't actually resolve the tension. So it's basically protracting the conflict. At some point that will bubble up again. Because as long as that injustice is in place, there is going to be resentment about it, and that will be built up eventually. And it'll boil over. And gradually, the black masses in the South began to reevaluate themselves, a process that was to change the nature of the black community and doom the social patterns of the South. We discovered that we had never really smothered our self-respect, and that we could not be at one with ourselves without asserting it. From this point on, the South's terrible peace was rapidly undermined by the blacks' new and courageous thinking, and his ever-increasing readiness to organize and to act. Conflict and violence were coming to the surface as the white South desperately clung to its old patterns, which we see an echo of today. The extreme tension in race relations in the South today is explained in part by the revolutionary change in the black person's evaluation of himself and his destiny, and by his determination to struggle for justice. Black people have replaced self-pity with self-respect and self-deprecation with dignity. This is fundamentally a good thing. All people should be able to have that self-respect and dignity. And that's not just something that you experience within yourself. It is also something that you must experience within the society you live. It has to be realized. If it is not being realized, if it is being undermined, then you are living in an unjust society. And the only way to maintain it is to struggle against that society. When Mrs. Rosa Parks, the quiet seamstress whose arrest precipitated the nonviolent protest in Montgomery, was asked why she had refused to move to the rear of the bus, she said, "It was a matter of dignity. I could not have faced myself and my people if I had moved." Many black people who joined the protest did not expect it to succeed. When asked why, they usually gave one of three answers. I didn't expect people to stick to it. I never thought we had the nerve. Or I thought the pressure from the white folks would kill it before it got started. This one happens frequently. Like this is not unfounded. There were several movements that happened before and since that were killed before they got properly started. In other words, our nonviolent protest in Montgomery is important because it is demonstrating to the black person, North and South, that many of the stereotypes he has held about himself and other black people are not valid. Montgomery has broken the spell and is ushering in concrete manifestations of the thinking and action of the new black person. We know now that we can stick together. In Montgomery, 42,000 of us have refused to ride the city's segregated buses since December 5. Some walk as many as 14 miles a day. Holy fuck. So, I want to pause here just on this one point, okay? The idea of the transformed nonconformist that we spoke about in the first speech today, I want to put out the question. If it meant advocating for equality and for rights, not even just for yourself, but for your fellow man, would you be willing to walk 14 miles a day when you had the means just by hopping on a bus to not do that? Don't have to answer in chat, just like that is the type of resolve that should be aspired to. Being willing to massively inconvenience and yourself and suffer even. Yeah, in the time period, yes. I'm again, it's not like this is a challenge to you. Like it's more just an exemplar of the kind of action that may end up being needed. Like not specifically that, but that level of, yeah, also they did have a carpool to the extent possible. Yeah. Yeah. It's more kind of just getting in the mentality of radical organizing. Right. Some couldn't afford to walk that far. Yes, that is also true. And that's what the carpool tried to mitigate as much as possible. It's more kind of a metaphorical, would you be willing to go that far in inconveniencing yourself for a just cause? And for, like, because it wouldn't necessarily be that, but there may, if an opportunity arose to organize, there usually is a personal cost. And I think it's good to mentally prepare for that. And reading about cases where these sorts of things happened and where this sorts of organizing happened can be illustrative of what to kind of mentally prepare for. Yeah. It's quite a bit, Andrew. Our leaders do not have to sell out. Many of us have been indicted, arrested, and mugged. Every Monday and Thursday night, we stand before the black population at the prayer meetings and repeat, "It is an honor to face jail for a just cause." This is something that happens in a lot of protests. Especially if you get separated from the group or you stay longer than most of the group. The police will start finding anyone who's a straggler, anyone who they can isolate, and they will jail you. They'll hold you as long as they can negotiate holding you. Basically inconvenience you and seek to get you, lose your job, lose your income, potentially lose more than that, even if they can't actually charge you. That's something that happens frequently in protests. Why it's extremely important for an organized protest movement to also have a organized bail relief structure behind it as well. Shout out to Bail Project and National Bailout, two great organizations. Threats and violence do not necessarily intimidate those who are... Wait, did I read this one? Yeah. Do not necessarily intimidate those who are sufficiently aroused and nonviolent. The bombing of 2 of our homes has made us more resolute. When a handbill was circulated at the White Citizens Council meeting stating that black people should be abolished by guns, bows and arrows, slingshots and knives, we responded with even greater determination. Our church is becoming militant. 24 ministers were arrested in Montgomery. Each has said publicly that he stands prepared to be arrested again. Even upper-class black people who reject the come to Jesus gospel are now convinced that the church has no alternative but to provide the nonviolent dynamics for social change in the midst of conflict. The $30,000 used for the carpool, which transports over 20,000 black workers, school children, and housewives, has been raised in the churches. The churches have all become the dispatch centers where the people gather to wait for rides. There's also, just as an aside, there is a very important distinction between non-violent protest and non-disruptive protest. And very often people think they're the same thing because the definition of violence has been expanded, especially by liberals, to include everything. So when they're saying nonviolent dynamics, they're meaning very specific things. They mean actual violence, like bombing houses or actually directly like attacking people. And you can be extremely disruptive while still being nonviolent. Unfortunately, in today's media, you are extremely disruptive. Fox News and such will play ad nauseum clips of, a barrel trash fire burning and say that you're burning a city down. It's not the same thing. Anyway. Yeah. Because of this mythology of what nonviolent protest looks like. And it is a mythology. These were not quite events. We believe in ourselves. In Montgomery, we walk in a new way. We hold our heads in a new way. Even the black reporters who converged on Montgomery have a new attitude. One tired reporter, asked at a luncheon in Birmingham to say a few words about Montgomery, stood up, thought for a moment, and uttered one sentence. Montgomery has made me proud to be black. Economics is part of our struggle. We are aware that Montgomery's white businessmen have tried to talk sense to the bus company and the city commissioners. We have observed that small black shops are thriving as black people find it inconvenient to walk downtown to the white stores. We've been getting more polite treatment in the white shops since the protest began. We have new respect for the proper use of our dollar. Boycotts are... they're useful to an extent. Unfortunately, this is a lot harder to nail down today. So what he's referring to here is actual, this is in an era of actual private small businesses. People just running stores. That's not today's business model at all. Everything is a chain owned by a chain owned by a conglomerate. Not everything, but overwhelmingly, you're not going to hurt Walmart even if you can organize a local protest and boycott of Walmart. If Montgomery stopped shopping at their Walmart for a while, Walmart wouldn't really give a fuck. They might close down that store or pull some of the employees from there. I don't have an answer to that problem. The monopolization of corporations has made it really, really difficult to organize effective boycotts against them. We've discovered a new and powerful weapon, nonviolent resistance. Resistance is also an important one. It's not just nonviolent protest, it's nonviolent resistance specifically. Although law is an important factor in bringing about social change, there are certain conditions in which the very effort to adhere to new legal decisions creates tension and provokes violence. We had hoped to see demonstrated a method that would enable us to continue our struggle while coping with the violence it aroused. Now we see the answer. Face violence if necessary, but refuse to return violence. If we respect those who oppose us, they may achieve a new understanding of the human relations involved. That goes so far. It can help, but I want to dwell on the idea of nonviolent resistance a little bit more. Because the other part of the frequent condemnation of nonviolent protest, or of protest movements in general, is demanding that they strictly adhere to being explicitly within the lines of the law. Must be 100% legally conducted. And that's not always the best way to go about challenging a law, and it isn't the full definition of nonviolent resistance. Nonviolent resistance or civil disobedience can be breaking the law, but in a nonviolent way. Explicitly violating the law and accepting that you will be arrested for that, but doing it in an organized, larger scale manner. So yeah, there's a few different things about that. It all comes down to whatever is being organized about, and reading the temperature of what is possible within your particular struggle. We now know that the Southern Black has come of age politically and morally. Montgomery has demonstrated that we will not run from the struggle, and will support the battle for equality. The attitude of many young black people a few years ago was reflected in the common expression, "I'd rather be a lamppost in Harlem than governor of Alabama." Now the idea expressed in our churches, schools, pool rooms, restaurants, and homes is, "Brother, stay here and fight non-violently, because if you don't let them make you mad, you can win." The official slogan of the Montgomery Improvement Association is "Justice without violence." The issues in Montgomery. The leaders of the old order in Montgomery are not prepared to negotiate a settlement. This is not because of the conditions we have set for returning to the buses. The basic question of segregation in intrastate travel is already before the courts. Meanwhile, we ask only for what in Atlanta, Mobile, Charleston, and most other cities of the South is considered the Southern pattern. We seek the right, under segregation, to seat ourselves from the rear forward on a first-come, first-served basis. In addition, we ask for courtesy and the hiring of some black bus drivers on predominantly black routes. Sorry again. A prominent judge of Tuscaloosa was asked if he... I know, it's... it's... Should I, Bing? I thought about doing some readings. I did do a reading of The Red Room on SoundCloud. I don't need the pass from Vouch. I don't... Yeah, that guy. Anyway. A prominent judge of Tuscaloosa was asked if he felt there was any connection between authoring Lucy's effort to enter the University of Alabama and the Montgomery nonviolent protest. He replied, "Autherine is just one unfortunate girl who doesn't know what she's doing, but in Montgomery it looks like all the black people have gone crazy." Later, the judge is reported to have explained that, of course, the good black people had undoubtedly been riled up by outsiders, communists, and agitators. It is apparent that at this historic moment, most of the elements of the white South are not prepared to believe that our black people could of themselves act like this. Again, 1950s, like, this is not long ago. Miscalculation of the white leaders. This is an interesting timeline. Really interesting timeline. I like that this is broken out this way. Because the mayor and city's authorities cannot admit to themselves that we have changed, every move they have made has inadvertently increased the protest and united the black community. December 1st, they arrested Mrs. Parks, one of the most respected black women in Montgomery. December 3rd, they attempted to intimidate the black population by publishing a report in the daily paper that certain black people were calling for a boycott of the buses. They thereby informed the 30,000 black readers of the planned protest. Whoops. December 5th, they found Mrs. Parks guilty and fined her $14. This action increased the number of those who joined the boycott. Also December 5th, they arrested a black college student for intimidating passengers. Actually, he was helping an elderly woman across the street. This mistake solidified the college student's support of the protest. 2 policemen on motorcycles followed each bus on its rounds through the black community. This attempt at psychological coercion further increased the number of black people who joined the protest. In a news telecast at 6 p.m., a mass meeting planned for the evening was announced. Although we only expected 500 people at the meeting, over 5,000 attended. Some of these are very interesting. Yeah, the modern version of this is predictive policing. Absolutely is. One of the difficult parts today is word of this could spread very easily within Montgomery because people had a shared local news. And this is one of the difficulties of the modern news landscape. First of all, people are largely disconnected from whatever is actually happening in their own community. Second of all, our mainstream media landscape is very tilted towards maintaining the status quo. So it is difficult for these sorts of things to actually get talked about or amplified. That is one of the few things that I would say is positive about social media existing, although I still condemn the way it actually handles its algorithm to a strong degree. We're atomized to our jobs in this consumer society. Absolutely are. And when we do read about news, it's usually purely national news, or when we see it on the TV and such. And local stories are... It is just kind of a little bit more difficult to get in tune with the people around you. December 6th, they began to intimidate black taxi drivers. This led to the setting up of a carpool and a resolution to extend indefinitely our protest, which had originally been called for 1 day only. December 7th, they began to harass black motorists. This encouraged the black middle class to join the struggle. December 8th, the lawyer for the bus company said, "We have no intention of hiring black drivers now or in the foreseeable future." To us, this meant never. The slogan then became, "Stay off the buses until we win." December 9. The mayor invited black leaders to a conference, presumably for negotiation. When we arrived, we discovered that some of the men in the room were white supremacists and members of the White Citizens Council. The mayor's attitude was made clear when he said, "Comes the first rainy day, and the black people will be back in the buses." The next day it did rain, but black people did not ride the buses. Ooh. At this point, over 42,000 Montgomery blacks had joined the protest. After a period of uneasy quiet, elements in the white community turned to further police intimidation and to violence. What I really appreciate about this timeline is, like I said, the way it's taught is such a hyper-sanitized version that makes it seem like it was just, oh, we done fucked up arresting Rosa Parks. Let's just fix it and I'll get along. No. That is not what happened. January 26th, I was arrested for traveling 35 miles per hour in a 25-mile zone. This is what we just read about a moment ago. This arrest occurred just 2 hours before a mass meeting, so we had to hold 7 mass meetings to accommodate the people. January 30th, my home was bombed. Yeah, I'm just going to pause there for a minute. I'm just going to let that one stew for a little bit. This is, again, for context, over Rosa Parks' bus incident. This is 2 months in, and they escalated to the point of bombing the home of Martin Luther King Jr. That is the reality of the extent of struggle for civil rights. This was not won through just speeches. Damn. February 1st, the home of E.D. Nixon, one of the protest leaders and former state president of the NAACP, was also bombed. This brought moral and financial support from all over the state. February 22nd, 89 persons, including 24 ministers, were arrested for participating in the nonviolent protest. There's a myth that a lot of people believe that if you are arrested in the course of a protest, you must have been doing something wrong or been violent. It is a myth that needs to be dispelled among white liberals in particular, because that attitude is often used to ignore what a struggle is about. Arrests in protests don't necessitate the protesters doing anything wrong, and certainly, even if they've done something technically illegal, it does not mean that their actions were unjust. We're drawing on a prior speech. The justice is what was the exact phrasing? It's basically the calculation of love. Love in calculation, yes. And that can and often does put justice and laws in tension. Every attempt to end the protest by intimidation, by encouraging black people to inform, by force and violence, further cemented the black community and brought sympathy for a cause from men of goodwill all around the world. Great appeal for the world appears to lie in the fact that we in Montgomery have adopted the method of nonviolence. In a world in which most men attempt to defend their highest values by the accumulation of weapons of destruction, it is morally refreshing to hear 5,000 black people in Montgomery shout Amen and Hallelujah when they are exhorted to pray for those who oppose you, or pray, O Lord, give us strength of body to keep walking for freedom. And conclude each mass meeting with, let us pray that God shall give us strength to remain nonviolent though we may face death. Unfortunately, this only does work if indeed the sympathy and support manifests. There are a lot of struggles, civil rights struggles going on in America and in abroad. And the burden is on, each of us to actually realize support for those movements. The liberal dilemma. And death there may be. Many white men in the South see themselves as a fearful minority in an ocean of black men. Ooh, this is gonna get deep into the paint with modern manifestations of great replacement and white fragility and all this shit. This is gonna get this is gonna hit hard. They honestly believe with one side of their minds that black people are depraved and disease-ridden. They look upon any effort at equality as leading to mongrelization. Yeah, this already sounds weirdly familiar. Look on any any fucking open panel on here, and you'll see someone whining about some of these points. They're convinced that racial equality is a communist idea and that those who ask for it are subversive. They believe that their caste system is the highest form of social organization. The enlightened white Southerner, who for years has preached gradualism, or incrementalism as we know it today, now sees that even the slow approach finally has revolutionary implications. Placing straws on a camel's back, no matter how slowly, is dangerous. This realization has immobilized the liberals and most of the white church leaders. They have no answer for dealing with or absorbing violence. They end in begging for retreat lest things get out of hand and lead to violence. We can't ask for too much. People are uncomfortable with it. People won't support that. We have to meet people exactly where they are, and we can't ever push the envelope. Let's just wait and see. God damn. Yeah. No, this is exactly this type of shit that we still deal with. That we still see among white liberals today. Writing in Life, William Faulkner, Nobel Prize-winning author from Mississippi, recently urged the NAACP to stop now for a moment. That is to say, he encouraged black people to accept injustice, exploitation, and indignity for a while longer. It is hardly a moral act to encourage others patiently to accept injustice which he himself does not endure. This needs to be stamped on people's heads. Okay. I want to hammer that line again. It is not a moral act to encourage others patiently to accept injustice which he himself does not endure. Yeah, the writer. This is something that comes up a lot in discourse. Especially, so I want to touch briefly, tangent briefly into something that I see a pattern of in like some Twitch debates and stuff, which is to say, very often it just devolves into white people yelling at white people, and the conversations just get stuck. A while longer is in perpetuity until the broader white community is comfortable with it. And this is actually a talking point that comes up over and over again, is whether it be about trans rights or whether it be about name the issue, whatever the moral panic of the day is, that people aren't ready for that. So we need to hold on and rally more support and not act too harshly about it or use too harsh of a language. Very, very often, especially when engaging with conservatives, I hear that like you have to temper language and soften your rhetoric for fear of coming across as like an extremist and being dismissed or whatever. But what is that? What is that in practice? Is just it's this in implementation. It is conforming to white supremacy, cisnormativity, what have you, for fear of offending unjust white people, while Very often this is argued by a white person who themselves is not impacted by that injustice. Yeah, it's 100% liberal discomfort. Like that. One of the things that I hear very often, like one of the things that I advocate for is police and prison abolition. And I cannot tell you how many people have, at least initially, they very often do come around over time, but at least initially say, hey, but you can't say abolish the police because people bounce off of it. And it's like, okay, but that's, I'm not advocating for putting training wheels on police. I'm advocating for abolishing the police. That's the goal. That is what is just. The burden still is on making the case for that. But if you start from a position that you're not advocating for, if you start from an unjust position because you're compromising your position, then you're making the case for something you don't believe in. There's an issue with dishonest framing from sometimes on the left. Oh yeah, a lot more dishonest framing from liberals and conservatives, absolutely. But this is just straight up, like, you need to think about your position. And if it is a just one, it is a just one. People's feelings about it are irrelevant. If you're compromising your position, make other people more comfortable, and especially if it's about something that you yourself do not face, you are doing something that is not a moral act. You are compromising justice and morality and your own character for the sake of conformity. Ooh, that's a spicy line. I like it. Yeah, I like that. I like it. Anyway, sorry. In urging delay, which in this dynamic period is tantamount to retreat, because once you actually have some structure organized, it's very difficult to spin it up again later. Faulkner suggests that those of us who press for change now may not know that violence could break out. He says we're dealing with a fact, the fact that of emotional conditions of such fierce unanimity as to scorn the fact that it is a minority and which will go to any length and against any odds at this moment to justify and, if necessary, defend that condition and its right to it. Translation. You are dealing with people who are motivated by fear, by their own feelings, and who will lash out against you violently to stop you. I think Faulkner here is naive in thinking that they didn't realize that. Like, these are, at the time they were still being lynched. They had just had 2 of their fucking houses bombed, for fuck's sake. Yes, they know. They know that violence is possible. We Southern blacks believe that it is essential to defend the right of equality now. From this position, we will not and cannot retreat. Fortunately, we are increasingly aware that we must not try to defend our positions by methods that contradict the aim of brotherhood. We in Montgomery believe that the only way to press on is by adopting the philosophy and practice of nonviolent resistance. Freedom Riders was before, I believe. Yeah, maybe, yeah. Emmett Till was way before, yeah. Yeah, Like, violence in this struggle was not new. Faulkner's warning there, it seemed very unnecessary, but, you know, he probably felt like he was helping, like, I'm worried about you. Please don't get hurt. And it's like, we're being hurt, dude. We're going to be hurt either way. Let's at least advocate for justice, right? Like, yeah. This method permits a struggle to go on with dignity and without the need to retreat. It is a method that can absorb the violence that is inevitable in social change whenever deep-seated prejudices are challenged. You'll send it in DMs later? Okay, yeah. This again, like, when they are saying nonviolent, again, what they're explicitly talking about is people just arming up with guns and doing a armed revolution sort of thing. They're not saying that they are completely non-disruptive. And I know I've said it before, I'm just going to keep hammering on it because there's so much confusion about that point. If, in pressing for justice and equality in Montgomery, we discover that those who reject equality are prepared to use violence, we must not despair, retreat, or fear. Before they make this crucial decision, they must remember, whatever they do, we will not use violence in return. We hope we can act in the struggle in such a way that they will see the error of their approach and will come to respect us. Then we can all live in peace and equality. The basic conflict is not really over the buses. Yet we believe that, if the method we use in dealing with the equality in the buses can eliminate injustice within ourselves, we shall at the same time be attacking the basis of injustice, man's hostility to man. This can only be done when we challenge the white community to re-examine its assumptions as we now prepare to re-examine ours. We are not prepared to re-examine ours. We do not wish to triumph over the white community. That would only result in transferring those now at the bottom to the top. But if we can live up to nonviolence in thought and deed, there will emerge an interracial society based on freedom for all. Good article. Really good article. Let me take a look at this real quick.